Wren story, written by Becca Lewis, copyright 2020. Wren story, audio, read by Becca Lewis, copyright 2020. Author's note. This story answers the question posed at the end of Discovered, the last book in the Thamon Chronicles. Although it won't spoil the book to hear this story now, I wanted to let you know in case you want to save this story until after you have finished the series. Banished, Betrayed, Discovered can be found anywhere you buy or read books, or start at my website, beccalewis.com, BECALEWIS. For those of you who have already made your way through the series and can't wait to find out what happened, here's your answer. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. Wren pulled Meg from Tarek's arms, reached out to include Silky and Suzanne, and in a flash was gone, leaving a stunned Tarek with Wren's command to meet them at the islands ringing in his ears. It was a dangerous move, but one Wren had prepared for, even though she knew the consequences of doing so would be dangerous. More than dangerous, deadly. Which is why she took Silky and Suzanne with her. She would need their help. There was only one problem. She had not warned them. It had been a conscious choice to keep it a secret from them, but at that moment, between dimensions, Wren had a moment of burning fear that she had been wrong not to tell them. Her husband, Karn, knew, but only because she had to talk to someone about the plan, someone who knew her family's history, someone who would tell her the truth and keep her secret. Despite all that they had been through together, or maybe because of it, she trusted her husband, so she had brought her plan to Karn, and despite knowing the dangers, he had agreed it was the right thing to do. They both knew that when Meg chose to save Thamon, she would die if Wren didn't take her to the only place that could help her. They agreed that Meg deserved to live, no matter the cost to Wren. So at that moment, Wren didn't think about the consequences of what she was doing. She already knew what they could be, and she was willing to take the chance. She had returned home after hundreds of years of being away, returned after being told never to return. But it was the only chance she had to save Meg, and knowing that, she had gathered all her courage and pulled the four of them through the portal to Oloron and come home. Wren wasn't surprised to see her father and mother waiting for her, arms folded over their chests, faces rigid and disapproving. She knew she was probably only imagining a flicker of happiness in her mother's violet eyes. Her mother was a beauty, even when she was angry. In the shadows, more of her people stood silent and disapproving. "I had to come," Wren said. Meg lay limply in her arms, more dead than alive. "Yes," her father answered, no emotion in his voice. Turning to his wife, she nodded, and he added, "You chose to disobey us for this human? And you brought in Oaken and Shapeshifter with you too? Were you not told to never come here again?" "I know you understand that I had to. This woman will die without your help." Wren's mother placed her hand on her husband's arm, and they turned their back on the four of them. "Yes, they are my parents," Wren whispered to Silky and Suzanne before they could ask. "Don't speak. Just wait." Not that Silky and Suzanne felt like speaking. They were both in shock. 1 minute they were on the planet Thamon, and now they were someplace else. For both of them, the fight to stop Aaron Lim was still pounding through their veins. Just a moment before, they had been watching dragons wheeling through the air, people running from the woods to help, and Meg bursting into flames. Now, Wren had brought them someplace that did not want them, and the only reason she would do that was she thought Meg had a chance. Suzanne could hear Wren's parents speaking together in a language she had never heard before. It sounded like water, liquid and frozen, flowing and then crackling as if the words were breaking. Even though Suzanne didn't understand anything they were saying, it was easy to see that they were arguing. Suzanne turned to Wren and took Meg out of her arms. She hadn't let herself think that her sister might be dead. She had watched her turn into a beam of fire and then collapse. Only Wren's words that Meg might die kept her from breaking down. That meant that Meg was still alive, even though she could detect no breath or beating of her heart. She had to trust Wren. There was no other choice. But still, tears rolled down Suzanne's face as she knelt on the ground, cradling her wild child sister who had just saved a planet. "Where are we?" Silky whispered in Suzanne's ear. "Shh," Wren hissed. Suzanne closed her eyes and leaned over Meg and prayed. It didn't matter where they were. If Meg died, nothing mattered. "We will put this human in stasis while we decide," Wren's father said, turning back to the 4 intruders. Gesturing to the guards standing nearby, he said, "Take her." "No," Suzanne said, clutching Meg closer to her. Wren knelt in front of Suzanne and Silky and whispered, "It's Meg's only chance. They will keep her safe while we persuade my parents to let me help her. Please trust me and let her go." Wren's mother stepped forward. "You have my word. This girl will be safe. But you need to know that my daughter has put you all in danger coming here. So it is possible that not only will she die, but all of you will die with her. Do you agree with this? Otherwise, we will return all of you to where you came from." "But my sister will die if you do that?" "Yes, your choice. But make it now, or we will make it for you." It was Silky who answered. "We will stay." "So be it," Wren's father said. "Wren, we will give you and your friends time to rest. You will need it." Chapter 2. Moments later, Silky, Wren, and Suzanne found themselves alone. Meg was gone. Wren's parents were gone. And all the people surrounding them had vanished along with them. No one spoke. Suzanne fell to the ground, her forehead resting on the soft earth, keening over what had happened. Never before had she felt so helpless. As the ambassador between Gaia's dimensions of Earth and Erda, Suzanne had always been calm and mostly unafraid, rarely showing emotions. Following her sister to the planet Thamon was a decision she willingly made, knowing she could never return to either place. She had to remain strong as they fought for the freedom of the people of Thamon. But this was different. "It's not different," Wren said, sitting down beside her. "It's just not over." "Yes, it's over for the people we left on Thamon. The planet will heal. The people will return to their lives better off than before because they know what they almost lost. But our fight is not over, so don't give up now, Suzanne." Suzanne lay her head on Wren's shoulder and wept. Wren sighed and lay her cheek on Suzanne's head, trying not to sob herself. Even though she knew she wouldn't be accepted when she returned home, it was hard to process how much it hurt to have her parents and the people of Hilarion look at her with such disdain. The fact that she deserved it didn't soften the blow. It made it worse. Silky had settled into a tree above their heads, waiting for the grief to subside enough for them to make a plan. She understood grief. And Oaken always outlived the people they had bonded themselves to. Although Silky knew that death was not the end, only a passage into another dimension, it still hurt. She missed the wizards she had served, and now the cord between Tarek and her had been ripped apart. That's how she first knew they were no longer on Thamon. Finally, Silky could wait no longer. "Where are we, Wren? And now what do we do?" Wren helped Suzanne to her feet, and Silky flew to Suzanne's shoulder, both of them waiting for Wren's answer. Yes, I brought you to my home planet. It's not far from Thamon, and as you can see, it resembles Thamon. The two suns, Itar and Tren, that we could see on Thamon, are lower on the horizon here and further away, so it never gets fully light until the third sun, Cleo, rises. That's the sun that is setting now. Once it sets, it will be cold, so we need to find shelter, and then I will tell you the story of why I was banished from Hilarion. If you are banished, will they still help Meg? And how can they? Suzanne asked, trying not to cry again. This expression of emotion was so unlike her that she was finding it hard to think. Wren patted her on the back as she said, "That emotion will pass, Suzanne. It's not just because of what happened. It's also part of this planet's energy field, very emotional. We are used to it, but visitors find it disconcerting, at least when we had visitors." Seeing Silky and Suzanne's puzzled faces, she added, "I promise, more information after we find shelter." In the short time they had been talking, the air had gotten decidedly colder. Suzanne and Silky had no trouble agreeing with Wren. "But where?" Silky asked, looking around the clearing where they stood. They were surrounded by what she could call trees, even though they didn't look like any she had seen before, and the low sun's light was filtering through them enough to see there was nothing but trees and brush all around them. "My parents are not heartless, angry, but not heartless," Wren said. "I know they left a way for us to find the shelter they left for us. Close your eyes and look for it." Wren held up her hand when Silky started to speak. "I mean it. Close your eyes. Instead of thinking you have to see it, feel it." "Wow," Suzanne whispered. I see it, or feel it, as you said. If I open my eyes, will it still be there?" Hearing Wren's yes, they all opened their eyes and saw the silver path through the woods. Suzanne laughed despite her sorrow. "I've seen paths like this before on Gaia." Wren took a deep breath and said, "Yes, you have," before heading towards the path. "We need to hurry. This will fade quickly when the sun goes down. Run." They ran, Silky on Suzanne's shoulder, Wren leading the way, the path fading as the sun dropped. The sounds of the forest moved from bird songs to a howling that sent chills up Suzanne's spine and caused Silky to burrow herself deep into Suzanne's long white hair. Just as the sun flashed below the horizon, a small cabin came into view, and the three women staggered inside, Wren bolting the door as soon as Suzanne stepped over the threshold. A fire was already burning in the fireplace, and the table was set, and food laid out. "Thank you, Mother," Wren whispered. In response, a small violet flame flared inside the fireplace. No one spoke, all three more hungry and tired than they had ever been. "In the morning," Wren eventually said once they had eaten and drunk their fill. In the corner of the room were piles of pillows and blankets. Within minutes, the three of them were sound asleep, none of them noticing the violet flame morphing into Wren's mother. She stood watching the sleeping women, leaned over, and gently covered Wren's shoulder where the blanket had slipped down, a single tear dropping onto Wren's pillow. In the morning, Wren found Suzanne outside the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the forest that lay around them. The sky was a dark purple from Itar rising low on the horizon. "Do Itar and Tren still cross each other here?" Suzanne asked, thinking of how the people of Thamon always watched, hoping for a blue flash. "They do, but not often, and even if they do, it's rarely seen because Cleo will be too bright. So all the conditions have to be right." "And do the people here think it's good luck?" "They do," Wren answered. Suzanne turned to Wren. "Why would that be? Why would the people here on Hilarion and the people on Thamon believe the same thing? Is it a coincidence, or does it have something to do with you?" "You are a wise woman, Suzanne. Come inside. I will tell you some of the story." Inside, the fire was still burning, and the food they had not finished was still fresh. Suzanne and Silky didn't need to ask. "Yes," Wren answered the unspoken question. My people know magic, and yes, sometimes they use it. It's because of my mother. She is a beloved leader. But the ruler of the other kingdom on Oloron has banned magic. Magic is used here only when necessary, and always hoping he will not notice. Why was your father upset about a shapeshifter and Oaken? Silky asked. Shapeshifters are not allowed here anymore, and if somehow they still exist, they may not use those powers. If they do, they are either killed or banished. It's always their choice. Obviously, I made mine. Seeing the look on Suzanne's face, she added, Yes, you are not allowed here either, and yes, bringing you here put you in danger. But I thought you would choose this if you knew it was where we could help Meg. Silky, the danger for you is not that you are not wanted. It's because you are valuable. If something happens to us, you will be asked to bond with one of the wizards here and never return to Tarek. But I brought you because of your growing bond with Meg and her offspring if she survives. Forgive me if I made the wrong choice. Suzanne looked at Silky and then said, You made the right choice, Wren. I need to be here. We all need to be here. Chapter 3. They're here, Wren breathed. She didn't have a chance to explain who before 4 men appeared inside the cabin, taking up so much room they forced Wren and Suzanne into a corner, Silky hiding once again in Suzanne's long white hair. You are coming with us, one man boomed. Suzanne felt a massive hand on each arm, and a moment later they were standing in the courtyard of a building that looked very similar to the castle she had known in Erda. Have you told your friends why you were banished yet, daughter? Wren's father asked, stepping closer to the 3 of them. I didn't have time. Perhaps it would be better if you told them, Wren said, shaking the men's hands off her arms and stepping closer to her father. Volkan motioned to the men to stay, and saying, Come, to the 3 travelers, walked away. Wren glanced at Suzanne and Silky before following her father into a small room where Wren's mother sat waiting for them. Volkan sat beside her and gestured to Wren and Suzanne to sit in the chairs facing them. Once the door was closed, a profound silence enclosed them. No one spoke. Finally, Wren's mother, Aluni, sighed. We missed you, Wren, but you have broken the laws of the land. What would you have us do? Save Meg and send her, her sister, and the Oaken back to Thamon. I will take whatever punishment is warranted for returning. Suzanne spoke. No, that cannot be allowed. Wren has risked everything to save my sister. I will take the punishment, and Wren can return to Thamon with my sister and Silky. Silky. Perfect name for an Oaken, Wren's father said. We haven't had an Oaken here for centuries. We need one. Wren rose. Whose fault is that, father? Obeying old laws destroyed them. Perhaps my returning was more than just saving my friend. Perhaps it is to help this world too. It's dying, isn't it? I saw the trees. Something is wrong. Turning to Suzanne, she added, And no, they will not punish you just because I brought you here. You were not wrong. Perhaps I was not wrong either, but that doesn't matter. What matters is Meg lives and my friends return home. Surprising everyone, Silky flew to Wren's shoulder and said, No, we all survive. Tell us what you want us to do, and we'll do it. In exchange, you save Meg, and we all return to Thamon. And I saw the damage in the forest, too. What happened here? Where are the Oakens? Why did you banish shapeshifters? Is it possible that we can help you in exchange for helping us? Wren's mother stood, putting her hand on her husband's shoulder. Enough. Yes, the trees are dying. And yes, if they die, so does the planet. So perhaps your return, Wren, is what we need to save us. But they are dying because of what you did. Can you undo it? Will you? I will not accept the entire blame for what happened. Yes, I had a hand in it, but I did what I thought was right, and then you banished me for it, pretending it was because I am a shapeshifter. However, I have accepted that you also did what you thought was right. Perhaps we were both wrong. So yes, I will help now. I love the people of Hilarion. Wren softened her voice and added, and I love you both, despite what you forced me to do. Suzanne stepped forward. Wren has not yet told us the story of what happened, but whatever it is, I will do whatever needs to be done. Silky and I will help Wren and your planet, but I need your promise that my sister will be saved no matter what, even if we fail. Meg had no part in this and does not deserve to die. Will you agree to send her back to Thamon no matter what happens? Wren's father stood and stepped forward until he was only a few feet from Suzanne. What right do you have to ask this of us? We make no such promise. Are you always like this? Suzanne asked, glaring back. No wonder Wren hasn't returned. Do you know your daughter at all? She has been caring for the people of Thamon, doing what needed to be done to ensure their freedom. I suspect she would have and will do the same for the people of Hilarion if you would let her. Turning to Wren, Suzanne said, Get my sister, and we'll return to Thamon to bury her there. I will not have this, Wren's mother shouted. All eyes turned to her. Wren gasped as her mother's gown morphed into violet flames. Both Wren and her father screamed no at the same time. It's time for this to be over, Vulcan. I will go with my daughter and her friends to see Oloron and find a way to end this. But the prophecies, we can't defy them. The violet flames of her dress danced higher as she answered, When did we become so afraid, my love? We banished our daughter. Our world is dying, and yet we have always had the power to stop it. But the prophecies, Vulcan said again. Once more, Suzanne stepped forward. Perhaps this is why we are here. I believe I know these prophecies, and we have defeated them before. They are only words, but it is your actions that have given them power. Why have you banished your daughter? What are you afraid of? It's not what, it's who, Aluni said, her dress no longer flaming. My husband, Wren answered. Karn, Silky whispered. What does Karn have to do with this? Not Karn. Yes, Karn knows the story. I told him when we first fell in love on Thamon. He knows I had a life before him. That's why I had to talk to him about bringing Meg here. He knew what I had done, or didn't do, and he knew that this is where Meg can be brought back to life. Someday, Karn will die, and I will live on, and he is the one I will mourn. We lived for centuries of your time, and many centuries ago, they gave me in marriage to another man. Because of the prophecies? The silence that filled the small room where the five of them stood together was the answer. Finally, Suzanne spoke. Tell me. Chapter 4. Aluni gestured, and a table appeared set with food and drink. Wren walked to her mother and hugged her. Thank you, she whispered. To Suzanne and Silky, she added, My mother has been defying the prophecies and my father since we arrived. Turning to her father, she asked, Will you help us? Glaring at all of them, Vulcan sat at the table, gesturing to the others to join them. No one spoke. Emotions played across Vulcan's face until finally he sighed and reached for Aluni's hand. We will not say Wren's husband's name. I am sure word has reached him that you have returned, Wren. If you don't go to him soon, he will come for you. We need a plan. Did you banish Wren because she did something wrong or to protect her? Suzanne asked. Both, Wren answered for them. I did something wrong in my husband's eyes, and my parents said they would punish me. They sent me away instead. I let them. I thought it was the best thing to do for the planet and the people. I thought if no one could find me, everyone would be safe. I see that I was wrong. How bad is it? Wren asked her mother. Worse than it looks, Aluni replied. You use magic to keep it from me? Wren asked. I thought if you didn't see how bad it was, that you would take your friends and go away again. So you would sacrifice your planet and people for your daughter? Silky asked. Silky had left Suzanne's shoulder and was now perching on Wren's. Suzanne sighed again. Wren, tell us what happened. When Wren didn't answer, Aluni spoke up. I'll tell you the story, at least what we know. Then perhaps Wren could fill in the rest. What happened doesn't matter, Wren said. What matters is we stop it. I thought I was bringing Meg here so we could heal her. I didn't know we would have to save yet another planet, but we will. I know more now. Suzanne told us the story of the two bored brothers on a snake-shaped spaceship. Before I learned that story, I still had the belief that perhaps there was a God who wrote the prophecies, and I had disobeyed them. I believed that I deserved to be banished from Oloron. But now I know, Wren glanced at Suzanne, that we were just another one of the brothers' experiments. What are you talking about? Vokon demanded. Suzanne stood and started walking around the small room. The food on the table had remained untouched. Only Silky had sampled one of the fruits and then rolled her eyes. Wren glared at her. It's delicious, Silky whispered. Suzanne hadn't noticed. How many times do I have to tell this story? Suzanne wondered to herself. I'll make this as simple as possible. Yes, I am a shapeshifter, a limited one at that. But the role I keep finding myself in is as a teller of this story. First, let me give you a little from my history. My home planet is Gaia, and I have lived in 2 dimensions there, Earth and Erda. But I was born in Erda. I moved to the Earth realm, along with others from Erda, to keep the girl who would become the Queen of Erda away from an evil man named Abaddon. We lived in the Earth dimension for many years. While there, I lived an everyday Earth life. When it was time, those of us who had come from Erda returned home. It was during our fight to stop Abaddon that I learned about the 2 bored brothers. These 2 brothers were from a very advanced civilization. Eons ago, their planet was destroyed. However, many of the people escaped the destruction, including the brothers. The brothers explored the universes, leaving everything as they found it until they got bored. So instead of leaving things alone, they decided to experiment. They decided to bet on which was true power, good or evil. The brothers set up experiments to force the issue. Earth and its 2 dimensions were one experiment. In the Earth realm, it was represented by Cain and Abel. In Erda, it was Abaddon and Darius. My sister Meg felt trapped on Erda. Looking at the big picture, I see now that Meg had to go to Thamon to save it from Aaron Lim. I followed her. And that's where we met Wren and Silky. And Wren had to bring Meg here too, all part of a bigger design. Stop the brothers' experiments. Are you saying that the brothers came to Oloron too? Yes, that's what I think. I think the brothers are the ones who left prophecies, as they did on Thamon. Prophecies that hint at what was to come. If yours is like the one on Thamon, there is a choice to be made. I think Wren might be the answer to that. Looking at Wren, Suzanne said, So yes, what happened does matter, Wren. What was it you did or didn't do? I said no to him. I refused him. At first I believed that I could do it, follow what the prophecy said the daughter of Vokon and Aluni had to do, marry. I had known that I was destined to be his wife from an early age. We barely knew Oloron. Yes, that's his name, and I am not afraid to say it. He lives on the other side of Oloron in his own kingdom. In our kingdom, we learned to harness the extra emotional energy of Oloron to focus on beauty, kindness, and joy. It never occurred to us that it was different in Oloron's kingdom. The ambassadors he sent to us to prepare for the wedding seemed kind and cheerful. I suppose we should have realized something was up when they were reluctant to return home. Before the wedding, we met Oloron a few times in a small village that sits on our two kingdoms' borders. Did you like him? Suzanne asked. No, but I didn't dislike him either. And as I said, I knew my destiny. The prophecies said that we had to marry to continue to have peace on Oloron. I was willing. Aluni broke in. We all thought we were doing the right thing. Looking at Wren with love in her eyes, Aluni added, the wedding was beautiful. We held it here in our kingdom. The people were so happy. The prophecies were fulfilled and peace would continue. We knew that Wren was resigned to marrying Oloron, but it was her destiny. So you married, moved to his kingdom, and then what happened? I found out what he was doing to his people. I said, no, I won't help. And what? Suzanne asked. I hid his power source. Chapter 5. Finally, Bokan spoke. Wren left Oloron, ran away from him, and came home. Oloron followed her. Enraged, he threatened her. She refused to tell him or us where she had put it. That's when we banished her, but told Oloron that she had chosen to leave us. We thought by making her go, it would protect us too. We believed that Oloron would see we were on his side. We were. I was. I worked with Oloron to find what she had hidden. I was furious. We had peace for thousands of years, and Wren put us all in danger by refusing her husband, by not truly becoming his wife. Bokan looked directly at Wren, his eyes squinted and hard lines around his mouth. Even without what you hid from him, Wren, Oloron became even more powerful or more daring. He crossed the border and slowly but surely has been spreading his base emotions. Our people have lost hope. Many have died because Oloron is sucking the life out of the planet and the people. He has banned shapeshifters and magic. Your mother, showing her magic, has put us all in danger. Give it back to him, Wren. Let us return to peace. Don't you see, Wren sighed, what he has done without what I took, he will do 1,000 times better if I return it. All of Oloron will be under his spell of evil thoughts and ideas. I came back knowing that I have to retrieve it. I thought to save Meg, and now I see to save Oloron too. But I will need your help. You have to believe me. Father, you are a wizard. Can't you act like one? A good one? If you would have believed me, this all could have been avoided. But instead, you believed a prophecy. It wasn't written by a god. It was 2 brothers who were playing games, gambling. Help me, please. Then I'll leave if you don't still want me here. What do you need? Aluni asked, glancing at her husband, her voice firm. Protect me while I go get it, and then help me use it to do the right thing. And you will know what the right thing is? Bokan asked, his tone soft, but his eyes were blazing. Suzanne stepped forward. We will. We will decide together. We will go with Wren, and together we will know what the right thing is to do. Meg knew the right thing to do, even though she held ultimate power in her hands. We will do the same. Husband, Aluni said, protect us. I will go with him, but we will need your protection from Oloron. Do the right thing now, as your daughter has asked. We were wrong before. We didn't trust what Wren told us, but we have seen the destruction that Oloron has done to our planet. Even if the story Suzanne has told us is not true, that it wasn't 2 bored brothers that set up this choice, it doesn't matter. It still is a choice between doing the right thing or letting the wrong thing happen. Turning to Wren, Aluni asked, How far away is it? Not far, Mother, Wren answered, but you need not come. We can do it. I do need to, daughter. I should have stood by you the first time. Let me do it now. Wren nodded, and Aluni moved to stand beside Suzanne, Wren, and Silky. "Will you help us, my love?" Aluni asked. "I will guard you with my life," Bo-Katan answered. Wren broke from the group and ran to her father, and he opened his arms to embrace her. "I'm sorry," Bo-Katan whispered. "I am too," Wren responded. The two of them remained in a long hug for a few more minutes. Suzanne felt tears dropping onto her cloak. This planet, she thought, all these emotions. Aluni leaned into Suzanne. "Yes, it's glorious when these feelings are focused on good." Suzanne closed her eyes and, using all her feelings to send her sister love, whispered silently to her, "Rest well, Meg. We'll return to our home in Thamon soon." She hoped it was true. "It isn't far," Wren said. "But since my mother is here, I suggest we use her magic to get there. But once we are there, it will have to be me who retrieves it." Wren shook her head when Suzanne started to interrupt and said, "You'll see why. Mother, will you take us to the shores of Lake Blaine?" A violet haze rose round them, and Suzanne felt as if her insides were melting. It wasn't an unpleasant feeling. She closed her eyes and hoped for the best. Within seconds, the melting feelings disappeared, and she opened her eyes to see an expanse of blue water that stretched to the horizon. Cleo had risen. Its golden rays dancing on the lake were so bright she had to hold her hand in front of her eyes. Seeing that, Aluni reached into her cloak and handed them all a pair of glasses. Suzanne laughed. It reminded her of her mother, always prepared, what was needed, always tucked away somewhere. Since they were standing in the open, Aluni gestured behind them to a stand of trees. "Best to be out of the sight of Oloron's spies," she said. "I am sure he felt what I did and will look for us. Bo-Katan will shield us as long as he can, but we need to hurry. Where is it, Wren?" Wren tilted her head towards the lake. "In there." Chapter 6. Bo-Katan stood in the room by himself, his thoughts tumbling from one idea to another. He hadn't wanted to admit it before, but he was ashamed of what he had done, or not done. He should have believed Wren when she told him what Oloron was doing. Instead, he was afraid he would lose his place in the world, fearful that his people would suffer, and now they already were. He knew the forests were dying. He knew that many of the people in his kingdom didn't have food and housing. He knew that even more had gone missing, and yet he had done nothing. No longer. Bo-Katan strolled out of the building and, soaked in the rays of the three suns, he closed his eyes and started chanting. He surrounded the four women with a spell that would cloak them for a little while. It wouldn't last long, but he hoped it would last long enough to enable them to do whatever they needed to do. Sweeping his cloak behind him, he headed toward the group of men that had brought Wren to him. "Prepare to fight," he said. "Oloron is on the move." A wave of fear swept through the men, and Bo-Katan shivered despite himself. Focus that fear into determination. It's time to stand for what is right. We can do it. Our planet is counting on us. The men looked at each other and then back to Bo-Katan and smiled. Bo-Katan, their leader, had returned. They were ready. Oloron could feel the power draining from his body every second that ticked by. Once Cleo rose, it would restore him enough to move, but not until then. Guards stood at his door, making sure no one entered during the night. They didn't know why he hid each evening since that wench Wren stole his power source. They thought he was mourning. Mourning for centuries? How stupid were they? The suns revived his source enough to function during the day, but without the focus of the crystal, it wasn't enough. So he had supplemented it by draining power from people that didn't matter. People in prisons, people who lived alone. He had ceased to care how it looked that his people turned gray and then died. He kept alive only those that served him. That's why the guards at the door would never betray him. He had kept them and their families alive as a reward. After draining the people of his kingdom, he moved out into the woods and gardens. Once they began to die, he had to move into Vokon's territory. Vokon had turned a blind eye, which made it easier. But Oloron knew that eventually there would be nothing left to keep him alive. He no longer cared to be the imposing ruler of a land. Whatever it took to stay alive, he would do it. As he lay on the floor of his bedchamber, he knew he was only a black shadow on the rug, even with all the lights on. His mind worked, though, for now, but his body was nothing more than darkness. The room he lay in was made entirely of glass. Even most of the roof was glass. He needed to gather every source of light possible. The moment a ray of the first of the three suns seeped into the room, he would begin to revive. When Cleo finally rose, he would become himself, at least on the outside. On the inside, his cells were continually dying. But hope had returned to Oloron's heart. He had felt Wren's return. He knew she had gone to her parents. Oloron didn't understand why she had returned, but that didn't matter. What mattered is he would find her and force her to give him the crystal. Then he would kill her for deserting him and making him live like this. He shuddered. This wasn't living. It was surviving. Wren would pay for her betrayal, and today was the day he would do it. He would begin the minute Cleo rose. He would suck the power from everyone around him, yes, including the guards and their families, to have the strength to go to that wench. Once he had the crystal, he would no longer need any of them. He would be the only power of the planet. He waited, only a shadow on the floor. Finally, Itar's weak beam reached him, restoring his sense of smell. Why smell first? He didn't know. That was one sense he would just as soon not have. He smelled terrible. The world around him smelled terrible. Why wouldn't it? Everything was dying, including himself. As Trin rose, his hearing returned, but there was nothing to hear other than his own groaning as his body woke up. Slowly, at first. But then when Cleo popped over the horizon, he rose, unsteady, but capable of moving. It would take a few hours to gather all the power he needed. Then he would go to Vokon and force him to take him to Wren. He didn't have much time after that, but he would drain Vokon and anyone else that tried to stop him. Before night fell, he would have the crystal. After that, the world would be his. Chapter 7. The four women stood together, Silky hovering in the middle of the circle made by Suzanne, Wren, and Aluni, holding hands. All their heads were bowed. Nothing was said. Each prayed in their way. Each chose to do the next right thing. Each chose to be guided by love. Wren finally broke the silence. I'm ready. I wish I could go with you, Suzanne said, but dragons and water don't mix well. Wren smiled. No, it can only be me. Once I touch the crystal, Oloron will know where I am, and we need to be prepared. Aluni gathered Wren in her arms and whispered, Be safe, daughter. Wren nodded and turned quickly, so no one would see the tears in her eyes or feel the terror in her heart. She had told them it would be easy to retrieve the crystal, and that was true, but none of them had seen Oloron and what he could do. She turned back to them when she realized that she needed to be clear about what would happen. Oloron will use this crystal to amplify the emotions and feelings of everyone on Hilarion. Then he will feed off it. We can use the crystal to heal Meg, but that will be the cost. Suzanne's face drained. Why did you bring us here, then? This is too high of a price to be paid. I was hoping to do this quickly and then hide the crystal again, but now I am not sure it can happen that way. But no matter what, now that we are here, Oloron knows that I have hidden it in the lake. Eventually he will find it, so I will have to hide it again somewhere else. Can you do that, Wren? Aluni asked. Wren shook her head. I don't know. Turning, Wren ran towards the lake. As she waded into the water, they watched her shapeshift into a mermaid and dive into the waves. Suzanne felt a frisson of delight at the beauty of it and thought how lovely it must be to become anything you wanted to be at any time. But the euphoria didn't last long. Abject terror replaced it. That was something, despite all that she had gone through, she had never truly felt before. It had to be Oloron coming closer, magnifying base emotions. "It is," Aluni said, and reached out to hold her hand. "Be ready." After what felt like an eternity to the three women, but was really only a few minutes, Wren's head broke above the waves. Turning back to herself, she ran forward to the women who ran towards her. The crystal shone in her hand, not much bigger than a pebble. It reminded Suzanne of the ring and the pendant that Meg had destroyed. For a moment, Suzanne hated the two brothers. What right did they have to do this? Design this game with these stupid power elements to tempt people as an experiment. It was wrong. The moment passed, and everything became clear. This time, it was her turn. "We need to destroy this," Suzanne said, nodding at the crystal. "Well, not me. All of us could. If it is as you said, Wren, that means that Oloron will lose all his power." "But if you do that, Suzanne, I can't use it to heal Meg." Suzanne turned to look at the setting suns and thought that perhaps if Meg died, she would do the same. Her heart would break and her life would end. But she knew what she had to do anyway. Turning back to Wren, she said, "Meg risked everything to destroy the ring and pendant on Thamon. She could never live with the fact that using the crystal to save her life meant that another planet would die." Aluni nodded. "It's agreed then. We will destroy the crystal because it's the right thing to do." Silky, Wren, and Suzanne nodded. Above them, a bolt of black ripped through the sky. The smell of dead flesh enveloped them. "Oloron's here! Do it now!" Wren screamed. Chapter 8. Volkan lifted his hand, and he and his men vanished. A flash later, and they were outside the room where they had taken Meg. "Keep watch," he said to his men as he opened the door to the small chamber where they had brought the girl. "Has anything changed?" Volkan asked the woman who had been sitting in the corner of the room reading a book. She stood, shocked that Volkan had walked into the room. He was the ruler of the kingdom. He never went anywhere. His wife Aluni traveled the countryside talking to the people while Volkan took care of the kingdom's business. Or that was the story that was told. And yet, here he was. Volkan saw the tremble and fear in the woman's eyes and realized once again how far he had strayed away from taking care of his people. He had banished his daughter and enabled Oloron to decimate his kingdom. "No more." "Is she alive?" Volkan whispered. "Sir, maybe." Volkan knew what she meant. Meg had died in Thamon, but not yet in Hilarion. They had the power to bring her back to life. No, he did. And yet he had banished her to this room. What if this was his daughter? Volkan's knees collapsed and he knelt by the bed and reached for Meg's hand. He was a wizard. He could do this, and perhaps using his powers once again would distract Oloron from going after his wife and daughter. And this girl's sister and friend, he reminded himself. Volkan dropped into his heart and let the love he felt expand and flow into the room and out into the forest. The woman taking care of Meg gasped. The pain that had plagued her was gone. The room became so bright she closed her eyes and sank to the floor. And still, Volkan continued. He could feel the planet gasp and then began to breathe again. Slowly, the pulse of love branched out and the trees sang. Oloron screamed. He saw Wren below him holding the crystal. He knew there were others with her, but he didn't care. All he needed was that one thing, and he had to get it before the light that Volkan was sending reached him. That light was not the light that would help him. it was the light that would destroy him. All that flashed through his thinking as he shot down towards the crystal. It was so close. He could see every facet, sparkling with Cleo's dying rays. It was calling him. He would answer. Aluni felt it, and her heart burst open. Vulcan had decided. Now, she said to Suzanne, Wren, and Silky. Violet light exploded out from their circle. The world shook. The women held firm, allowing nothing but love within their hearts. Then they turned that love towards the crystal. A violet flame licked at Wren's hand, and the crystal melted into a drop of shimmering water. Wren closed and opened her hand. The crystal was gone. The dark shadow, which had been just inches from Wren's hand, vanished. What happened next was a story everyone on Hilarion loved telling for many generations. The entire planet went dark. Not dark like the night, so dark that they couldn't see their own hands. After the event, people would laugh and say that they thought they had died. They thought they were alone. Terror filled their hearts where just a moment before, love had been. How long the darkness lasted, no one could say. Had it been seconds, or minutes, or hours? Some believed that it lasted for days. It depended on what they thought and did within those dark moments, but everyone agreed on what happened next. It was as if a switch had been turned off and then turned back on, and the light poured over every being on Hilarion. As if the planet had been reset, people would ask, hearing the story. Perhaps, was the answer. Only the 4 women by the lake knew what happened, but they kept it to themselves. What mattered was Oloron was gone. The brothers' handiwork was destroyed, and the planet was free. Chapter 9. They stood in the same clearing where they had arrived only a few days before, but this time Meg stood with them, Suzanne's hand firmly clasped in hers. Nothing was the same. The trees vibrated with health. Aluni and Vulcan were smiling. The people were no longer hiding in the shadows, but were openly surrounding the group, getting ready to leave. You know that months have gone by on your world, Aluni said. I imagine those that love you have been grieving. Now it's our turn to grieve. But, Mother, you know we're not dead, and now that I am not banished, everyone laughed at Wren's words, I could visit. Silky, who had been sitting quietly on Meg's shoulder, flew to Vulcan. I know the Okans that lived here have died, and you miss them, but I cannot stay. I belong with Meg and Tarek, but I do have friends. And Vulcan, I think 1 or 2 might like to live on this beautiful planet. Vulcan bowed to Silky, and when he lifted his head, tears shone in his eyes. I would be honored to have them. They will be treasured. Wren turned to her friends and asked, Are you ready? When they all nodded, Wren turned back to her parents and said, Thank you. They bowed, and a violet haze flowed across the clearing. This is not a banishing, Wren thought, as she enclosed her friends within the haze to return them to Thamon. This is a celebration. The end. Wren's story, written by Becca Lewis, copyright 2020. Wren's story, audio, read by Becca Lewis, copyright 2020.